Konnichiwa, my name is Logan Charles Luna, and this video is going to be about Megalobox. Specifically, Megalobox Season 2, Nomad. So, starting off, Megalobox Season 2 is subtitled Nomad, mainly because of where we find Joe in the beginning of the season. So, of course, this goes without saying, major spoilers for all of Megalobox, not just Season 1, but Season 2. So, Season 1, you see Joe as Junkyard Dog, who's a underground megaloboxer. And with the help of his coach and Sachio and some of the other orphan children from his district, they get to the championship of a megalobox tournament known as Megalonia. And not only does Joe get to the finals, he actually wins and becomes the first ever recognized world champion for megaloboxing at Megalonia. So Season 2 picks up after that. Now we find Joe on the road taking a bunch of underground fights, and he's bruised, he's scarred, bloodied, and there's grease all over his face from his gear. One of the big parts of Season 1 of Megalobox was Gearless Joe was kind of this folk hero of a man who goes into the ring fighting without any gear, proving that, he can fight no matter who it is, no matter what they're using to enhance their own technique and their own power. And that's what results in his rival Yuri facing him, also gearless, in the finals. So now we see Joe beaten up and somewhat defeated in Season 2. He's just going around town to town, taking up these underground fights, and he's also now addicted to painkillers. Not just any painkillers, he's addicted to some real crappy painkillers with nasty side effects. And Joe is followed by what is to be believed as the ghost of Nambu, his coach. And Nambu's ghost is just trying to get Joe to where he needs to be. And it's implied in the beginning of Season 2 that something happened, obviously with Sachio and the other kids, but something happened to Nambu that would lead Joe down this dark road of solitude. Joe comes across Chief, who is an immigrant boxer and is billed as the real boxer and a pro megalobox fighter. However, this isn't true, and Chief is just a other participant in rigging fights in the Megalobox underground, just like Joe used to do when he was Junkyard Dog. So Joe comes across Chief, they have a match, Chief takes a dive, and Joe kind of wants to test to see whether or not he could have taken Chief, and it's proven like straight out the gate that he could not have taken Chief. Chief just would have laid him out, especially in the condition that he's in right now. So Joe, healing over from all the painkillers and the side effects of that, he just takes more painkillers, he drinks, he's hoping that, he can finally reach his end. And throughout all of Season 2, the recurring theme is that these people who have come over as immigrants, they have a folk story of a hummingbird that will guide you back home. So no matter how far you stray, there's always a way for you to go back home. And then there's the story that correlates to the end song of Megalobox Season 2 Nomad. And it speaks of a nomad traveling the desert wanting to die. So a hummingbird is trying to convince him not to die. And the story is that they go out to the ocean where they ask for a wish, and he wishes to die. The hummingbird makes a deal with the Nomad that if he can convince the Nomad to lie and listen to his song, then he can convince the Nomad to go back. So the Nomad agrees, and as the story goes, the Nomad says, "I've lost everything, and that's why I want to die." And the hummingbird replies with, "You didn't lose everything. You still have hands to shoo me away, and you still have ears to listen to my song." The Nomad admits defeat, and the hummingbird sings his song. A song that is played at the end of every episode of Season 2 Nomad. After some classic Western stuff, because Season 2 does take a lot of inspiration from Western films in general, and I don't just mean like American or European film, I mean like Wild West cowboy shit. And Joe is kind of the old, worn down gunslinger who comes into town. But rather than him stepping up to the plate and saving the town and the home of where these immigrants stay, it's actually Chief. And Joe's role is to be supportive. Joe is there to be a friend to Chief, to be a coach, and to help just kind of give hope to these people. Because they don't really have a lot of hope when Chief tells them that he's going to win the tournament in order to save their home. But with Joe on their side, they feel more hopeful, they feel like it's an actual possibility. And Chief makes it all the way to the finals despite I think landowner, like the very barren type villain from old Western cowboy films. So he is basically rigging all the fights to go up against Chief, but Chief still manages to win and go the distance and claim the prize and save their home. However, in a very realistic ending to this story, Chief has taken so much damage in these matches where they've just been hitting him with dirty punches and attacking him in the back of the head. So Chief dies. He gives the money to a woman who owns a garage that Joe kind of has a liking to, but doesn't really get brought up again because Joe wants to kind of keep his distance. And at the funeral for Chief, something very special happens. Chief built his gear with his son Carlo, who passed away shortly after they migrated over to this country where Joe is. And the gear is given to Joe as kind of like a farewell and a thank you. So now Joe goes back home to confront his past, to make amends with Sachio and the kids for basically abandoning them. And Sachio blames himself for that because Sachio is the one that told Joe to leave, and then he did. So because of that, he and Sachio have to hash things out in the ring, and Sachio is ready to get just completely destroyed by Joe, but at the end of their fight, he doesn't do that. Joe decides instead to give Sachio a hug, because sometimes, you just need a hug, like you're going through a rough time. And throughout the season, we're giving little bits and pieces, and then we're giving a full flashback episode as to why Joe left. So Coach Nambu was sick and he was dying, and he wanted to just live out his days at the gym with the kids and with Joe, his family, Team Nowhere. But the doctor told Joe that there was a way to save Nambu's life. and give him a little bit more time. Joe, in order to pay for that surgery, was going to take a match against Yuri's student. I think I forgot his name, but yeah. So Yuri trains a new boxer. I think his name is like Lou or Yu or something. But yeah, so he trains a new boxer, and he becomes the Megalonia champion, and he wants to have an exhibition with Joe. Joe takes up the fight. Joe is in no mental condition to like properly have a fight, and that causes to his downfall. And Lou makes quick work of him, and now Joe fades away. Nambu passes, and he abandons his family. He abandons Team Nowhere. So after that, and making amends, there is a fighter that we saw in the beginning of season 2 who gave up boxing, Megalo boxing, after he saw Joe and Yuri's fight, because he felt that he wasn't at that level. This character is very interesting. His name is Mac Rosario. He has a very unique storyline that, I don't really want to get too much into it because it's best if you just watch the show. And now with season 2 really being on an opposition of season 1, where season 1 was a hopeful dream and fighting against the odds, classic, sports anime, Rocky movie type stuff. Season 2 was dark, introspective, and really focusing on the human psyche, the dark side of combat sports, and how Joe's nervous system is totally wrecked. And after the fight with Sachio, Joe actually collapses and is taken to the hospital, where they learn that his painkiller addiction was bad and did a number on him. But what's even worse is that his brain has like inflammation and signs of multiple just physical abuse on his body throughout the years. And the doctor says something very, jarring to them. There is no Megalo boxer in history who doesn't have brain damage. So now they're very concerned about Joe, as he's going to take a fight with Mac Rosario, who becomes the Megalo box champion after he defeats Lou. And he just really literally destroys Lou. Like, he puts him down. I thought at first there was going to be, like an Apollo Creed Rocky moment where Yuri is like hesitant to throw the towel, and then he does it, and then Lou dies. But no, Lou lives, and good. Like, I like Lou. And now Joe comes clean to his family about his past, about what he's done, about Chief, and he accepts to take the match against Mac. There's some dark tech stuff going on, just like there was in the first season, and that gets resolved quite well. And again, it's better if you just watch the show so that you get the full context of it and form your own opinion on it, because it's not going to be for everyone. Because this isn't just a standard sports anime. There's a lot of stuff about immigration, about racism, about just classism in general, and the advancement of technology, and how people can either use that technology to help society or just to profit and bring upon a massive downpouring, just domino effect of everything going wrong and collapse. So now, back to the review. Joe takes the fight, and he's not going in as Gearless Joe, how everyone remembers him as this legendary figure. Joe is going in as the real boxer, and he's using gear this time. Specifically, he's using the gear that was given to him by Chief, and he wants to use this gear because this gear protected Chief and focused on defense, so that he could always find his way back home. And that's what Joe wants. Joe wants to come home at the end of this fight to Team Nowhere, to Sachio, to the gym, to the kids. And he just wants to be with his family. So both Mac and Joe have seconds that are there for a specific reason. Sachio is Joe's second that's ready to throw in the towel if Joe looks like he's taking too much damage. And Mac has a technician who's a second who's there to stop Mac if he goes into Mac time, which is something that has to deal with a chip that they implanted in him to help him walk again. And this chip causes him to be overly aggressive and violent, and is what caused him to severely injure Lou in his fight against him. They have one of the best anime fights ever. It's so well done. The passion, the music, the way you can really feel the impact when they hit each other. And there's a point at the end of the fight where Joe is Gearless Joe once again, meaning he's just taking all of this punishment and he's getting completely wrecked. And at that moment, Nambu's ghost reaches out to Sachio and tells him, "It's your choice." Sachio throws in the towel. Joe loses the match, but he's okay with it because he got his last match. This was him at his best, and everyone got to see it. And everyone got to see Joe walk away fine and healthy. And that's the most important thing about this, was that both corners, both seconds were worried about the health of their fighter, because they have first-hand experience now of how this stuff can go very wrong. And Joe goes back home. They have a big celebration. The Team Nowhere gym is finally opened up again. Yukio, who was it was a tech company that made the gear and all that. She actually took care of some of the kids after Joe abandoned the gym. And the older kids, of course, they went out and they got jobs and they supported themselves. But for the smaller kids, they got taken in, and she brings them back. And she's looking like a total absolute MILF when she brings them back in her casual clothes. But it's funny because they don't have a sweet moment, because Yukiko and Joe kind of have this bitterness towards each other. So she just kind of shows up "Here, take your damn kids back." And Sachio wanted to be an engineer in season 1. And now he finally gets that chance to be one of the best engineers in the world. And he's going to go off on his own journey. Joe agrees to take Sachio half of the way there while he goes to visit the grave of Chief to tell him about his last match. Joe gives his precious motorcycle over to Sachio, and there's a real passing of the torch moment here, as now Sachio is going to embark on his own journey, and Joe is heading back home. At the end, Joe hears a phrase from Nambu. "It's going to get really lonely around here." He smiles and reflects on. Then he drives away. And in one of the final shots of the anime for season 2, we see Nambu resting in the back of the truck. And it was a really powerful moment for me. I legit started tearing up a bit, because that was such a great way to end this anime. If there's no season 3, I'm totally fine with that. This was such an amazing ending, and it brought Joe's story full circle. And the theme of the folklore fairy tale and the song that is primarily used throughout the entire season, it's about finding your way back home. Joe started off the season as the Nomad, as the man who was on a road to self-destruction and just wanted to die to end his pain. Now he's come back. There's still fight left in this old dog, and he's home. He's home to do the right thing. He's home to take care of those kids. He's home so that others can find their way back. And in many sense, Joe was the Nomad in the beginning of the story and somehow ended up being the hummingbird. Alright, that's where I'm going to end this video. If you want to see more of my fan art, go over to my social media at LCLX25, both on Twitter and Instagram. If you're interested in seeing the work I'm doing on my own manga, go check it out on my Patreon. It's going to be a link in the description of this video. It's also on my Instagram and Twitter page. This has been Logan Charles Luna. Sayonara.